Welcome to the Voice of the CDFA. I'm your host, Carol Lee Roberts, the current president of the Institute for Divorce Financial Analysts. And joining us this month is Leah Hadley. Leah is a Certified Divorce Financial Analyst and has recently presented at our national conference regarding financial abuse and how you can see that in some divorces. Leah, why don't you take a moment and introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Carolee. I am the founder of Intentional Divorce Solutions and Intentional Wealth Partners. I'm based out of Cleveland, Ohio, and I have 3 kids that keep me very busy in addition to the businesses. I started my business in 2016 and have really grown nicely over the years.
I know that you also do a podcast. Would you mind sharing the title of your podcast with our audience?
Absolutely. It's Intentional Divorce Insights. And we really focus on helping people to make thoughtful choices throughout the divorce process, rather than allowing it to be a very disempowering process, to really show people how they can empower themselves through that process.
I frequently am asked when I'm at conferences why anyone would want to focus on divorce. You're dealing with such an emotionally fraught time. And I've now taken to asking all of our podcast guests, what made you start focusing on divorce?
So it was an interesting combination of events. I have to say, working in the divorce space is incredibly personally rewarding. So anybody who is considering it, really take some time to think about how you can add tremendous value to somebody who is going through the divorce. But for me, I was a financial advisor and I was seeing clients just blow through their assets. I had inherited a book of business, and I was frequently seeing that it was a result of divorce and it was a result of poor financial planning during the divorce process. And I started to think, gosh, there's got to be a solution to this, because these people are not, their money's not going to last them. And then I started talking with a family law attorney that I knew, who introduced me to collaborative divorce. And I was fascinated by collaborative divorce and how a financial professional can get involved with really supporting the process. And I became a CDFA, I became collaboratively trained. And then I wasn't doing much of the work at that point, but then I went through my own divorce. And that really motivated me. So even as a financial professional, I was completely overwhelmed by the financial changes that I was experiencing. And I knew that if I was somebody who, had this background in the divorce finances, had this very strong financial background, and I feel like I'm drowning through my divorce, for somebody who doesn't have that, it can be really, really difficult. And so I decided to go out on my own and establish my own divorce practice.
It's funny. Over the years, I've seen lots of research about, and I think this is more typically US rather than international. But in the US, we're almost programmed never to discuss money. There have been
Right.
studies done that people would be more comfortable discussing the intricacies of their sex life than their finances. And I think that's part of the reason we see divorce being such a difficult situation. I think another part of the situation are the various levels of financial literacy.
Right.
You frequently have couples where one person is almost over aware of everything financial and the other, out spouse has no information about their financials. Do you see that often in your practice?
I do see it often in my practice. I also see often in my practice the one who was delegated the financial responsibility actually not being that financially savvy. And a lot of times, you're really depending on your spouse to handle that, if that's sort of how the responsibilities have been delegated. And so sometimes it's very shocking when people go through the divorce process to realize that, hey, that person who was responsible for the finances really wasn't doing a fantastic job with them. And that can create a tremendous amount of tension through the divorce as well. But certainly seeing that it seems to be one or the other spouses takes most of the responsibility for the finances, or at least maybe they divide it up between like general basic day-to-day budgeting and sort of more long-term investments and that kind of a thing. But it's very rare that we see two spouses who are both actively involved in the finances.
Like, I keep teasing that I keep a book for my daughter, so if I predecease my husband, he'll have some idea where our assets are, because he just, over the years, that's not what he does. He does lots of things in our marriage, but finances is not one of them.
Yeah.
I mentioned earlier the presentation you gave at our annual conference, and that I refreshed my memory of it this morning. But you mentioned that you'll have the person who has decided to take the role of managing the finances for the household, and sometimes they're just not good at that. But other times you can have that same person deliberately take advantage of their spouse. Can you talk a little bit about some of the warning signs for financial abuse that you've encountered?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because this is at all levels of wealth. So it's not for people who don't or who have limited resources, or for people who are significantly wealthy, but we see financial abuse throughout, the whole scope. And, there's a lot of really interesting red flags that we'll see. Sometimes they actually look really kind. And especially when maybe somebody's first starting to take control and kind of creating that power imbalance, sometimes they are doing things like giving gifts or paying for travel or doing things that look like they are just really coming from a genuine place. But what it's doing is manipulating the financial situation to say that I'm in control of the money, I'm in control of what we do with the money. Now, of course, that's not true of all gift giving and all of that. But if it's something that, over time you're seeing less and less ability to make those financial decisions for yourself and kind of relying on that other person to be the decider of how money gets allocated, that could be that power imbalance that leads to financial abuse over time. That's a really common one. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't look at their tax returns, but if you're not allowed to see your tax returns, if you've requested to see your tax returns, and you haven't been given access, that can certainly be a sign of financial abuse, that something is being hidden from you. Not having account access in general. But sometimes it's more subtle than that. Sometimes it's when we have questions or need to talk about financially related matters, suddenly there's a change in sort of the energy in the room. And it could be like, this is just not something that we talk about. It could be triggering an angry response or something like that. I think it's really helpful for couples to talk to one another about what their history with money is like, what their experience was growing up, if they've been in past relationships, what that money dynamic was. So sometimes you can understand that person and where they're coming from, and whether or not this is an abusive situation. If this is a really significant power imbalance and this person is trying to control the situation, or if they have some financial baggage that maybe we want to kind of deal with.
Well, and one of the things you also mentioned that I found interesting, I think most people assume if there's any type of financial abuse in the relationship, it's coming from the person who is more accomplished, or the higher wage earner, or the person who an outsider might think of the power behind the couple. But that's not always the case either.
That's so true. And I have so many folks who reach out to me who are so ashamed that they have gotten themselves in this situation because they are so accomplished in so many areas of their life. They could actually be the higher earner, and they could have just, let the money go into an account where the other person is taking responsibility for it. But it really does build a lot of shame, and it makes it difficult for people to talk about when they feel so successful in all these other areas of their life. But the one area is the finances, where they really let go of all responsibility and don't have a control over that situation.
Can you talk a little bit about how you approach providing a safe space for people to talk about this? We've already discussed that most people don't feel that comfortable discussing finances to begin with. Then if you layer in, there might be some shame about what the current situation is. How do you make it easier for people to talk about that?
So I create a very non-judgmental space where people are welcome to talk about their goals, their hopes, their dreams, what their worries are, and we are very direct about what are you worried about? What are your concerns? Because sometimes, Carolee, those concerns are very valid. And sometimes they're really out of left field, and we can really coach around how to look at things differently and see that you're going to be okay. But as a practice, we also offer support groups and divorce coaching in our practice to really round out the support that we provide people. But I'll give you an example of a woman who reached out to me. It's probably 9 months ago now, and we started working together. And she's a very challenging relationship with money. She had a very controlling spouse and is just very afraid to ask the questions. She's very well educated, very successful in her profession, but just as it relates to dealing with money, has just really struggled to even have conversations with me about it. And so we just take it really slowly. We're going at her pace, but like taking little bite-sized pieces of things that maybe we need as part of the divorce process. We gotta get a handle on this so we can answer somebody. But really taking it at her speed. So she's not feeling pushed. She's not feeling like, I'm not trying to control the situation. She's not just going from one controlling person to another.
So tell about some of your success stories, people who, after the divorce, are beginning to see their own independence and their own financial stability.
So one of the things that I love about having done this as long as I've done this at this point is a lot of times when people are really newly divorced and they haven't dealt with their investments before, they can be very conservative as the relates to the way they want to invest. And over the last few years, I've seen some of my earlier divorces where women in particular are now saying to me, I'm ready to take a little more risk. I'm ready to work toward a higher return because now I understand the market. I've been doing this a little while. We've been having these conversations, and now I'm getting more and more comfortable at understanding what does it mean to take additional risk. I have seen women go back to school. I have seen certainly people entering into new relationships, which is a beautiful thing. I just have seen so many things that have become such positive outcomes of the divorce that's where when I was talking about before, it's so personally rewarding to do this work. You kind of have to recognize people aren't their best when they come to you initially. They're going through something that is very likely the most difficult thing that they've gone through. But seeing them be able to really take control and responsibility. I work with a lot of people who have very limited financial knowledge when we first start working together. And then finding them being able to confidently have a budget that they are working against, having a financial plan where we're looking at what are their specific goals and how can they reach them. And then, of course, I love the celebrations when people can stop working and enjoy their retirement and all of that.
It's really a pleasure talking to you. And it's really, I think, one of the things that I've come to enjoy from this podcast the most is talking to our professionals and finding out the wide variety of ways they approach being a certified divorce financial analyst, because I think there are many different ways of practicing, but also the fact that to a person, everyone talks about what a rewarding field this can be. But, yes, you're not dealing with people when they're at their absolute best when you first encounter them, but you help them get back to
That's
their
right.
best.
And they're so grateful.
What if, last question, I promise, but if there was one hint you could give to someone who just received their CDFA certification, what would it be? What do you wish you knew when you were starting out?
I think just what you were just saying, Carolee, that there are a lot of different ways to approach this work, and there is a lot of opportunity and to find what feels right to you. So whether that's really diving into the forensics and the deep analysis, whether it's really working with people to kind of educate them on their financial situation, whether it's a particular population. I feel like my first few years, I just kind of tried this and that and found what I liked and found what I didn't like. And you know, talking with people who are doing it and really understanding how they approach their practice, I could have shortened that time frame for my own practice. It's a wonderful professional circle of people. I mean, I have found that the other CDFAs that I know are always willing to talk, or are willing to, if you have a challenging case, talk about a challenging case, but certainly open up and talk about what their practice is like and how they got started. I've talked to several new CDFAs and really enjoy it. So happy to have those conversations.
Well, and I think as a community, the CDFA professionals, much like financial planners in general, are willing to be open and sharing and don't view one another as competition. I mean, right now there's less than 5,000 CDFA professionals in the US. You know the number of divorces. You're not competing with other CDFA professionals. We're just trying to get enough people to provide the services.
That's right. The biggest opportunity is just for people to know that we exist.
Right. Well, thank you again for your time. I really appreciate it and enjoyed talking to you. And one more time, the name of your podcast?
Intentional Divorce Insights.